Welcome to the Sex, God, and Chaos podcast, a conversation built to help you address the mess, connect the dots, and defeat addiction. Doing your work matters because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Life is tough and we're here to help. I'm your host, Ben Derrick, and as always, I'll be joined by Roane Hunter. Let's jump right in.
Roane, that last one was a tough one.
Hit close to home.
Yeah,
real close to home for both of us. No doubt.
Right. We were probably the top two men in America to handle that topic.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Oh gosh.
Hey, speaking of America, we have people listening that don't live in America.
It's incredible.
It really is.
Man, our audience just continues to grow, and I don't know. It's kind of cool.
It just proves how universal these ideas are.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if it's just the title, "Sex, God, and Chaos." Maybe guys are Googling sex, and our podcast comes up. I don't know.
I prefer to think it's our uniquely Southern accents.
I think that's what it is.
They're worth listening to.
You're saying I have a Southern accent?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Here's the word for me where it shows gone instead of going.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
Instead
I'm fixing to.
Fixing. Yeah.
I'm fixing to.
Man, I'm so good at it. And I find when I'm with my family, it just comes out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, truly, we lived in Atlanta for many years, and I've had people tell me, that when they met me and knew me in Atlanta, I didn't really have the strong accent.
Oh, yeah.
But when we moved back, it's back. Yeah. I love it. The Southern gentleman.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, we're here to address another difficult topic. That's probably what we should have called this podcast. Another difficult topic.
It's always
difficult.
We were going to have a pleasant topic. Yeah.
Yeah, we decided against that. It's outside of our lane.
Go to church for that. Yeah. You could get that there. Yeah. Listen to a children's sermon.
Pleasant Baptist Church.
Yeah.
There probably is one of those.
I'm sure
if you put Mount in front of it.
Yeah.
Mount Pleasant Baptist Church.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, boy.
Dude,
so
we got to stop. We just lost all our Baptist listeners.
That's
again.
Okay. They'll be back.
They come back seeing if we're going to change.
They do, and we don't.
We never do.
So this actually is a great lead-in for our topic today, one that is so divisive inside of relationships, and that is resentment and bitterness. Once that moves in and sets up shop, it takes up all the square footage in that relationship normally. Very difficult to break, very difficult to understand how it moved in, and we get into a lot of conversations about who was right, who was wrong, what was just, that was unjust, you hurt me, I hurt you, you always hurt this person. I mean, wow, those sessions are usually just electric.
They're fun. They're entertaining. I make popcorn in the microwave, and the great thing is I get paid at the end to watch two people fight on my couch.
You usually don't have much time to say anything.
No, it's so true.
Well, man. I think we've made some progress today.
Yeah, this was really good for me because I got paid. But man, it is so true. I always say it's like, two kids in a sandbox and everybody's kind of playing nice together, and then somebody throws sand in the other's eye, and then all of a sudden they're hitting each other over the head with Tonka trucks. But man, that's a lot of marriages. And I don't think that's what God had in mind.
No.
And it's fascinating because you sit there and you look at two people at some point that really, they evidently must have loved each other, as twisted as their view of love was. But it was there, and it's all hunky-dory. And now we're sitting on the couch, and we just can't stand the sight of the other.
Yeah, it does.
How does that happen?
It still breaks my heart to see couples sitting on a couch as far away. I mean, they are hugging the rails on either end of that couch.
No doubt.
I'm like, hey, can I get you a chair? We could move you even further away.
No doubt. Oh, man, it's painful.
Exactly. And when you see it on display, you're like, these people are actually very successful, intelligent people. But what I'm seeing show up in this room right now is the opposite of all of that. but it feels so right for them, and they're just really justified in the whole thing. And look, let me say, I've been there. You've been there.
Well, that's what I was getting ready. Yeah, like lest you think that we're just observing this. No, we've been a real part of it and lived it out. And man, it sucks.
Yeah, we were talking off mic a little bit about these words. They seem interchangeable, but there is a little bit of difference between bitterness and resentment. I would love to kind of start there, because when we're using these emotion words, and we've said for a long time now, most people are very unaware of their emotional base. So when we sling these words out, I think we have to give some time to define them or walk around with them just a bit. So let's pick one and go.
Just when, to me, and again, I haven't even Googled it, but resentment seems to be more prevalent. It's on both sides of the fence, but in kind of working in this arena of sexual brokenness, what I see and what I was resentful towards my wife. And that resentment would be because of the story in my head, the false belief that somehow she wasn't for me, she was out to get me, she was controlling, she's always trying to tell me what to do, all those things that are just kind of a natural part of a relationship that normally or healthily you would try to work out and talk about. But in my perception and my broken filter with my own baggage, it was criticism. And that criticism for me, it bred resentment. And I was resentful because in my head, I'm trying to do everything I can in my codependency. Listen to the last episode. I'm trying to do everything I can to please and appease her. And when she didn't act right, well, now I'm resentful because my best efforts have been to no avail. So I was resentful. On the other side of the fence, and again, I'm just in my own experience. Eva was very bitter, and rightfully so, when everything came out. But that bitterness was there before she knew anything about my acting out behavior. And the bitterness in her story, and she talks about this, was rooted in growing up with an alcoholic father in that home, and there was bitterness even towards a man, namely her father. Now, growing up, she would have never even been aware of that.
Right.
But the bitterness, it was there, and then that would get projected onto me when she would envision me, or I'm a man, obviously, and so she would take that out on me. And again, a lot of times that's subconscious. This was all pre-recovery, and I mean, I was probably bitter in some ways too, but for me, mine was more resentment, and I think she would say that bitterness was more her reality. And then certainly after discovery, she was very bitter and very angry, and that was not just because of the betrayal trauma, but that went back into her own childhood of what she grew up in, and she brought that baggage with her. And that's the longer term work of recovery, is beginning to get into those relational dynamics and the intimacy disorder. But it was all there before discovery.
Yeah, the bitterness, resentment combo for me, the way it's worked out in my life or how I've observed it, again, this isn't clinical information. We're not reading from some research paper, just life, which, by the way, I think is the best way to approach counseling, therapy, mental health.
100%.
Let's be grounded in life here and not some ivory tower of a research project.
Some label.
Oh my goodness. Because whenever one label stops being profitable, we just create more so we can charge for those.
Or new medication.
New medication, right. But in my own life experience, I have seen across my family of origin, within my marriage, that resentment tends to be more a masculine thing, because resentment has with it the connotation of I will act out against because I resent you, and now I have someone I can hate even
it's
momentarily.
More
yeah,
focused.
it's more outward.
Yeah.
I mean, the definitions. If you look up the definitions, they overlap almost entirely.
Yeah.
But for me, in my family, in my key relationships, bitterness usually has been a more feminine response to the same situations, and leads to isolation or going to within. You know, I don't see in my family a lot of bitterness leading to acting out against another. It is a pulling away from and isolating out of bitterness. And the damage actually falling, I have a great deal of compassion on this because the damage actually falls on the female in the relationship and a lot of my client base. So we have actually a double whammy here. We've got a woman who is bitter. And again, this is just my experience. A woman who's bitter, who is hurt and is isolated in a relationship with a man who is resentful and is hurting externally. So the woman in the relationship is taking a lot of painful experiences on, and unfortunately the man acting out of resentment is just on this pleasure circus that he feels like is going to solve everything, and the longer this goes, the more damage that it does. And I understand that every relationship has a different temperature and a different way that things go. The big point we're trying to make today is that resentment/bitterness is very, very dangerous for relationships.
Well, and maybe the biblical picture, the thing that comes to mind is the story of Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi. When Naomi, everybody dies, lose everything. I think it says that she actually changed her name to bitter. I think it's Raka, something like that. But it's like, okay, maybe there's a biblical precedence for this idea of it's more on the feminine side, the bitterness. And I will often say that I think sometimes bitterness and resentment got married, and what they produced was a baby named contempt. Oh, there you go. Boom.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then that leads us into, doctors John and Julie Gottman, the Gottmans, and, we pay attention to them because of the research that they've done around marriage. And, they came up with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of marriage. And, when these 4 things are present, the marriage is probably not going to, just not going to make it. And, those 4 things, the first one is defensiveness. And then the next one is criticism, and then stonewalling, and then ultimately contempt. And they, their research over, observing, thousands of marriages over the years bears this out. And so that's why we pay attention to them. And the missing ingredient that they say, those 4 things are present in every relationship. The missing ingredient of the marriages that are going to make it versus the ones that are not going to make it, the missing ingredient is the ability to do repair work when any of those things happen. And that's what we see with so often with couples is there's just a lot of water under the bridge. There's a swamp of resentment and bitterness and ultimately contempt. I can't even stand being in the same room with you. That's not good.
So the trick with resentment, I think, as we've discussed, just sharing life as long as we have, is that sometimes there's a legitimate circumstance or action that leads you to feel resentful.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't like that.
Yes.
I really resent that you did that to me. Other times, though, it's made up.
It's a story in my head.
Yes.
Like I said, when Eva, in our marriage, it was my own insecurities and inability to, get emotional needs met. And, she would do things and again, some of that's just in the course of marriage. And I would get resentful. but I wouldn't talk about it. I would just, ruminate on it.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah. And, part of our acting out behavior is I had to be a victim, and a victim has to have a villain. And so I would make her the villain, and then that would justify, me acting out. Now, a lot of times this isn't like conscious thought, I'm going to make her a villain so I can go act out.
Great point.
But it's become a pattern, but it has to do with the way that I'm thinking. And I'm unaware of that filter. I'm unaware of that perception that she just has a complaint, but I'm perceiving it as a criticism, which is about who I am, rather than it's just a complaint. She didn't like this, or I forgot to do that. And I would personalize that into, toxic shame.
Have you just explained how we get to these apocalyptic level arguments over who got the mail? Or
Dude, isn't it true? I mean, we talk about this often. It's like, somehow you forgot to roll the garbage can out to the street. You forgot again. You're the husband. That kind of falls under your chores,
right?
And you forgot, and then you get home at the end of the day, and then she's like, you forgot to roll the garbage can out to the street, and then it's like, well, I didn't forget the other 732 times, but now somehow I'm a failure, right? And so now it's tapping into my insecurities, my toxic shame messages. I'm not enough. I'm incompetent. And then on her side of the fence is tapping into, well, he's not really invested in the home or the family. He doesn't really care. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about the kids. Because he doesn't care about the house. He forgot to take the garbage. Like, holy cow. Now I've constructed a whole movie around some stupid thing that was just simply, I forgot to do this, right? Holy cow.
Man, I'm over here. I can't stop laughing because I'm like, I have lived that day.
You've had that argument.
Yeah,
me too.
more than once, right?
Yes.
And boy, that I just get big and angry over the whole thing. And if I were to watch a film of that argument, literally
how stupid.
15 minutes later, I'm like, we're both children.
We're idiots.
But it does. Yeah. It feels like a complete attack. If it's hysterical, it's historical. Always. Kind of thing, and especially if it gets very personal. And we should probably do an entire episode on how to accept criticism. It's necessary. Criticism is necessary.
Well, and I think a lot of times, we have to discern: is it criticism or is it simply a complaint?
Yeah, or commentary.
Yeah. An observation. Sure.
Yeah. However, all of that isn't lighting off when we get into these dust ups with our significant others. All we're thinking is, I'm about to be right about this.
I've got to be right.
I've got to be right.
Yes.
And then when it doesn't, in my experience, when it doesn't resolve how I want it to, parentheses there, when it doesn't resolve, that's where resentment starts to build. And I do appreciate the way that the sacred text of Christianity talks about this. That's the text I'm the most familiar with. This may be in others as well, but it talks about bitterness being a root. That there's a root of bitterness, and other things grow as that root makes its way into your life. And that's a big part of our health journeys that we've discussed, through our friendship, is that resentment or that bitterness. It's dangerous because of what it leads to.
Boy, I tell guys all the time, one of the things today that I guard against, very aware of, is resentment towards my wife. Because 33 years of recovery, when the pull is the strongest today is when I've got some crazy thinking in my head. I'm getting resentful, making her the enemy, and boy, that pull to want to go act out, look at porn, masturbate, whatever, that's when it's the strongest. So maybe I need to look at, if I know that resentment is one of the things that's going to lead me down that path, well, maybe I could begin to really fight against resentment. And, if Eva was here, she would tell you that if we get sideways, which by the way we still do,
that's right.
It's amazing. But man, it doesn't last very long. We've got the tools. We've done our work to get out of that real quick, but I make a beeline to her if we've gotten sideways and she's gone back in the bathroom to get dressed or whatever. Man, I'm making a beeline to her to say something like, "Hey, I don't even know what that was really about. We'll figure that out and we'll talk that through. But one thing I want you to know is I love you. I am with you. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm all in."
Yeah.
Right? And that gets me out of ruminating over somehow she's out to get me, she's not for me, all of that enemy talk. Because if I move into enemy territory, danger.
Yeah.
Danger.
The story we start to tell ourselves is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Really
because pretty soon I'm going to be back into all the old trauma, the old messages, the toxic shame of, I'm on my own. She doesn't care about me. Mm-hmm. She's not for me. And I mean, that's old. And that was all there in the formation of my addiction. And so it's a pretty easy jump to understand why we would want to go act out when we get into this old negative false belief system.
The danger, I think, today is, and this has always been present, this isn't anything new inside of marriages or relationships, but the danger today is once that resentment starts to build, then you can open up Facebook and you can find a lot of people in your history that you're not resentful towards anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Or never were.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know these people. The last time that you were with this person, they were 19 years old.
Yeah. 14. You were in high school. You weren't even in high school.
14 years old. Now, you know what? I don't really resent her, so let me shoot her a message.
Yeah.
And then before we know it, we're in a full-blown affair because we're running away from our resentment. And what we know, because we sit with the whole arc of the entire narrative, you're going to resent that woman too.
Oh yeah, I always tell guys, you can get divorced, kick this one to the curb. I'll tell wives this too. Mm-hmm. But if you don't do your work, you're going to be back in my office in about a year.
Yeah.
6 months probably.
Yeah. I wondered what your timeline was going to be.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Like we're looking at probably about a year.
When
the shiny wears off.
Max.
Maximum. So if 6 months of fantasy, if this is all worth it for you, go right ahead. I'll see you in 6 months.
You're going to be broke. You're going to be driving your kids back and forth and dropping them off, and it's like maybe you could actually do your work, each of you, and you could actually get this thing out of the ditch, and it might be the marriage that God intended from the beginning, rather than the three-ring circus that you were living in.
So what makes admitting, I'm going to try to word this very intentionally, what makes admitting resentment so frightening?
Well, I think it's vulnerability, right? I don't want to even let you know that somehow you've got some power over me, because so much of in marital dynamics, it's a power struggle, and that will go on until you figure that out. We're trying to be in the one-up position, and we will fight it out to try to maintain that or to obtain it, and so it's vulnerability, and I don't like vulnerability. And growing up like I did, it's like, man, that is weakness, right?
Kryptonite.
Oh yeah. I mean, it really is it's an aversion to weakness, and so being vulnerable is not. It certainly for me wasn't in my repertoire, and it was not something that was valued or something that I knew even how to do or even to talk about.
I think a lot of the men that I sit with, or I know a lot of the men that I sit with, they hesitate to bring these things up because they're worried that sex is going to be withheld.
Oh, yeah.
Inside the marriage,
Yeah.
which isn't that just a sinister cycle to enter into? I don't want to admit that I'm resentful because then you might withhold sex from me.
Yeah.
But I'm resentful towards you, so I'm going to go find something sexual outside of this relationship to kind of get back at you.
Yeah.
Now I can't admit that I did that, so I can't admit my resentment. I also can't admit my acting out behavior. And there's this huge elephant in the room in our marriage, and everything stops. And then we end up at a therapist yelling at each other on a couch.
That's great. That's how it works.
This is exactly
circle of life.
How this goes. So I think a lot of it is for our listeners to say, of course, it's going to be frightening to enter into a conversation with your spouse basically at the apex of vulnerability to say, you did something, and my response to that something was to build resentment. I don't even know if that was a healthy reaction to that, but it's where I am. I don't know how tonight's going to go or even the next 3 weeks, because you probably have a lot of things to say about, me being resentful because I had to pull the can in from the street.
No doubt.
That's not going to be fun conversation either. I just have to acknowledge, and I think a powerful word for a lot of men listening would be admit. I just have to admit where I am.
That's it.
This is where I am.
And sometimes maybe as men we have admitted or tried to, and then what we got was pushback, or maybe she doubled down. And so in our heads, what we think is like, well, no, not doing that again.
Don't do that again.
Don't do that again.
Yeah.
And so we'll just go back into, man mode because it's comfortable for us just to kind of ruminate, shut it down, repress that. Mm-hmm. But it's going to come out in our actions and behaviors in some way, shape, or form. So I look at guys sitting in a couple session. It's so much fun. And I look at guys and I go, so like, dude, like your wife, when she's upset about something that you said or did, she just like mentions it one time. And then when you push back, she never talks about it again. Right. Isn't that how it works? No. Yeah, because she is all about relationship. That goes back to the created design of Eve. And so she wants the relationship to be right. And that's kind of the part of why she's here. She's the relational strength. And that's why she will continue to keep pushing that until you have a conversation and at least try to resolve it or attempt to, because that's what she's supposed to do in the created design. And for us men, we're like Adam, I guess. Just we were okay naming some animals and tending the garden until God comes along and says, "Hey, Adam, it's not good for you to be alone." Well,
really?
In our crazy heads, yeah.
Are you sure?
I know. It's like, oh man, I like alone because that's peace.
Yeah.
I can watch ESPN and drink a beer, and nobody talk to me, and I'm good. That's kind of in our DNA, but for her, it's not. And so in some ways, she is modeling healthy behavior, and we look at it as a threat. And so, she may push back, but there's nothing wrong with kind of leaning into that. Like, hey, I when you said that, that was hurtful. I felt disrespected. Wow.
Yeah.
See where that goes.
Yeah. A lot of it comes down to, I think, what is your relationship with the truth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see a lot of men, and me personally, I've become very resentful because people, and especially my wife, have gotten too close to the truth. You get too close to the truth, I'm going to start swinging, and then get really resentful when you won't just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. Right?
Yeah. Time to stop.
And I think, I don't want to speak for my wife. There's one thing I've learned in 20 years of marriage, but I can make some commentary. I think on her side, the bitterness moves in when I won't engage with the truth.
Oh, yeah.
I start to deny the truth, or what's most dangerous in my marriage is when I start to reframe the truth with my version. She'll tell me, look, I'm not your client and I'm not impressed with all your words. You're just avoiding the truth. which thank God for women in this world like
Strong
that.
women
Yes.
are a blessing.
Yeah, a huge blessing. But if you don't have a healthy relationship with the truth, I mean, all sorts of things in your life are going to go sideways. But I believe this is the primary gateway through which resentment finds a way into your life.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. And if I can sit with her and I can somehow in my head believe that she actually has my best interest at heart. Now, the delivery of that might not always be good. But
it lacks finesse or nuance.
Yeah, Eva, I call it with her, we talk about a hard start versus a soft start. Things go much better when she comes with a soft start than a hard start.
You ever walk into your house at the end of the day and just the hair on the back of your neck stands up?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, sums up. But I think it is certainly, just this idea of being able to talk about this stuff. But it's frightening, especially when we have a history, if there's infidelity, if there's betrayal, the chaos, as we talk about, because somehow, she's going to spiral into that, or she's going to use that and weaponize my vulnerability and move into using that to win the argument. And boy, that's a dangerous thing when partners on either side of the fence weaponizing the other person's vulnerability is poison.
It's easy to do, though.
It happens.
Now that you've given me a little bit of information, I'm going to sharpen the edge on that and stab you in the heart with it.
Well, and it is. And, the hard thing for, and I'll just use wives, the hard thing for them to see is, it's like this stuff that we were going to take to our graves. And certainly it has harmed them. There's no doubt. But it is a vulnerable part of who we are. This stuff that we were ashamed of, unless we were a psychopath. And now we brought it out into the light vulnerably. Now, sometimes we got found out and it was forced out. But like in my case, I admitted to Eva what was going on. And that was just God moved for sure, but it came out. And it's very vulnerable, and oftentimes in their hurt and in their pain, the spouse will use that because they're hurting and they're in pain, and they want us to feel that same level of pain. And they weren't in the fight for X number of years dealing with this, and now it's all new information for them, and they are in a lot of pain and they're hurting. And the tendency is to use that in a shaming way rather than to talk about their own pain and their own hurt. And it happens, and it's not going to get you where you want to be. I mean, it's human, but it's going to you're kicking the can down the road, because when that's going on, as the husband, as the betrayer, I don't want to go vulnerable ever again because you're going to use it against me, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
I've seen a few times this year, just to vision cast for the people who are listening, this go very well. And I think what leads to that is vulnerability that is supported by clarity. It isn't just random vulnerability or I'm just going to let this out and I don't know anything about what led to it, or that's why I believe it's so important for these things to be processed, whatever it is you're going to be vulnerable about in the beginning of your work, until you can do these things internally because you've had the reps and you've learned, as you mentioned, the skills. But to be able to be vulnerable in a group of people that have done their work, or with a clinician who has done their work, so that you can be vulnerable with clarity. Because if not, then it's going to feel very accusatory and there's going to be a really violent reaction to that. But when you provide clarity, I will tell you, I have seen both husbands and wives this year receive that vulnerability with so much grace and charity, because there was an explanation very early on in the vulnerability. I was resentful over this, but that wasn't really about you. I acted out in this way, but it wasn't because I was choosing this better version than what you're offering. This is on me. This was up to me from the beginning. I didn't do it. There were lots of reasons for that. I want to talk more about that. That revealing posture is a lot better than just, well, you know what, right? That usually doesn't end very well. But there is a way to do this that actually not only kills resentment for the time being, kills resentment, but it also increases the intimacy quotient in your relationship.
I just always think of, Psalm 51, David's confessional psalm, the psalm when Nathan confronts him, and then David admits, right? And, one of the things that he says is, God, it is against you and you alone that I have sinned. And I think what wisdom is telling us in that is David is taking full ownership. He's not blaming anybody. He's not trying to project. He's not trying to run from it. I mean, he is just standing in ownership of what he did, and it's on him. And I think, boy, that's a powerful statement and a powerful model for all of us. Is like, even if my wife and I get in an argument, and I start calling her names or I start cussing or something, that's not on her, right? That's on me in my own immaturity, in my emotional stuntedness, because I can do that different as a man, right? And I can't blame her because she said this. But so often on the couch, as you said earlier, he did this, she said that. And I mean, it's just case building rather than ownership.
Well, we've stumbled into it right there, haven't we? The cure for resentment is actually ownership.
There it is.
I see a lot of people who say, men and women, you know what? I didn't have a choice here. And then I say back across that little coffee table of truth, really? You really had no choice here? Like zero choices. You were out of choices. You were standing in hot lava. You had no choice. That's just not true, man.
Not true.
You have to convince yourself of that in order to do some of the terrible, painful, damaging things that we do. You have to convince yourself, there was no other way. That's usually not the case. 99 point whatever % of the time. So to be able to take some ownership, and man, does that put you in a different posture have that conversation. I think it puts you in a really mature and holy posture, actually, to take some ownership for your stuff. Take ownership for your stuff.
That's right.
You don't take ownership for their stuff.
Yeah, never own something that you are not responsible for or you didn't do, because what that's going to breed is resentment.
Come on. Yeah. Pointing that ownership in the right place. And, in my life, I think the times where I've grown the most, I've sat down over a sheet of paper and wrote down at the top, what do I need to own here? ?
Yeah.
And I think I'm only going to need a Post-it note, but I actually need a couple pages in a journal.
Poster board.
Yeah, there's a billboard maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that we can own, and that turns our focus into a more healthy location.
Well, even in an argument, maybe Eva comes with something that's like out of the blue, not true, is story in her head, whatever, and then I started to, my voice level goes up a couple of notches, and I get defensive. Initially, I can own that, because that's not the man I want to be. I want to be able to sit, and I want to be able to listen. I want to be able to empathize, and I want to be able to be curious and not furious. So I can own that, because that's not what I'm about or want to be. I may still do it, but it's not where I want to get to.
But furious feels so good, Roane.
Oh, powerful.
I feel powerful. Yes. I have made fire.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's probably something to that. Having that sense of ownership and admitting something feels weak. I made a mistake.
Oh, yeah. I was wrong.
Of course, you made a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
You woke up today, didn't you?
Yeah. One of the things that we coach is just like, man, stop saying I'm sorry. It's just so trite. It's really meaningless. I'm sorry. Maybe if you just lead with, I was wrong to talk to you that way. I mean, it's got more weight to it, right? And it's like, if I was wrong, well, then there is a right.
Yeah.
And maybe I could do it right next time.
Yeah. And so this allows us, I think this posture, this relational posture, allows us to give us the best chance to block the most resentment. Like, that's what's going to do it for us. If we can just adopt a posture of ownership and to see relationships, and I'm able to witness these often inside a healthy men's community. There's ownership occurring here. That person's owning that, and that person's owning that. Nobody's having to defend their worth here. And I think they're going to be fine. How does that work? But it does. Mm-hmm. Ownership moves in, and it is the silver bullet to a lot of resentment that can build, because it takes the other person off shift of having to manage your crap.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is, and we've talked about it. The drama triangle, and ownership is one of the positions. And oftentimes we tell couples a great place to start when you're in the crazy dance, the red triangle. If you want to get to the green, is just move to ownership. If we can own something that we've done, don't own something you haven't done, but if we can start there, typically what you'll see is the other person, they'll start settling down.
And they're ready to receive what you have to say, because they can take the gloves off. Right. In the sense of they don't need them anymore.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Not in the sense that they're getting more aggressive. But when you start using language inside of a marriage, like you just said, I was wrong. One of my most recent words that I use, and my family's actually making fun of me for it because that's the kind of dynamic we have. But I have said to sons and to wife, that was inappropriate.
Good.
Completely not appropriate.
Yeah.
And I was wrong for doing that. It wasn't what I intended. So my heart's not dark here, but boy, that was ugly. And I didn't mean it.
Yeah. It's much more powerful. It carries more weight, impactful.
Yeah. I love to hear in response to that inside my friendships too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah,
that's all
don't have to move in and clean it up. So I'd like to do this before we wrap up this episode, because we grazed up against it, and I was left wanting. The way that faith communities meet people in their vulnerability, I think, is really, really broken. And I know that there are a lot of our listeners who have probably, in their vulnerability, gone to a church environment, a Christian environment, and tried to be vulnerable with what they knew, and they were met with a pretty damaging version of do better, or, I mean, we see this happen a lot, right? So what advice could we give to people who have gone to the institution, as we would call it, with their vulnerability, trying to admit some things, and then they're met with something that results in them saying, don't do that again, right? What do we say to that group of people?
Oh, man. Listen to our episode on helper trauma. I can't remember which one.
That's way back,
but it's titled Helper Trauma.
Yeah.
Because so often we go to people seeking help, and then what we get is much more harmful or more damage. And I think, part of it is, one of the things we have to realize is that people go into these ministry positions, these helper roles, and this is true in counseling, and research bears it out, is that most of them come from broken homes or dysfunctional homes. There was a lot of stuff that was going on, and they kind of decided that they could be Jesus, they could be saving the world, and so they move into these helping professions. Again, I'm not throwing rocks. That's just statistically true. And they've never done their own work. And we call them, they're not wounded healers, they're unhealed wounders, right? And so they are inflicting their love on the poor people that are walking in the door. And it's just the idea, it doesn't matter who it is, pastor, counselor, friend, somebody that you're going to go talk to. Number one, you need to be sure that they are safe people. They can hold confidence. They're not going to pass judgment. They're going to listen and empathize, and probably not give you advice. Hopefully not, because it's usually terrible.
Yep.
But they're safe people, and that's part of our growth, is discerning safe people from unsafe people. And oftentimes in that ministry setting, whether it's church or counseling or whatever it is, they've just never done their work, and so it will be more harmful than helpful.
And we would say, don't give up on the process.
Right.
Just change the place that you're doing the process.
Yeah.
And you can figure that out very early.
Oh, yeah.
The key is when you're about 5 minutes into that, what's supposed to be an hour-long conversation, finding something else to get out of there. I'm sorry, I've got to go.
Yeah.
Because you have that feeling, and then don't take ownership for the things that person said.
Oh, yeah.
Don't own that stuff on the drive out of there, because that's the thing that shuts down the process, and then you've got resentment still building inside of your key relationships. Don't give up on that instinct that took you to that place in the first place, to want to start taking ownership for your life and for your story and for the things that you've done. You just need to change the place. And we would love, actually, if people would reach out to us through the channel of this podcast, reaching out through the website to say, hey, I need a place to start taking ownership. We know people.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
They can do this for folks.
You know, we always say we got more resources right here than you've got problems. And certainly between the intensives that we do, the men's coaching weekends that we offer, the coaches that we have available that can work with people across the country, boy, you know, the thing about the people that we have working with us, they're people that have done their own work. And that's what you got to find. If you want to get better, not bitter.
Yeah, that is the key, isn't it? So let's do this as wrapping this episode. What's the best way to hook into that? Website, phone number?
Yeah, the website, certainly the sexgodchaos.com is the website for the book and the podcast. And there's links on there to our counseling coaching practice, which is LifeWorks Counseling. You can do an appointment request right there on the website. That's the easiest way. And then certainly for you, getting in touch with Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would be the best way for somebody to track you down?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Similar website, benderrick.com. I've put some information up there so you can shop me from a distance, which I think is very healthy. I want you to know as much about me as possible before you start to trust me with your story. So, and we have scores of people behind both of our efforts that are people that are good at this that we can get folks to. But we would love nothing more than to help a larger section of the listening population to this podcast, because what keeps us awake at night is people who are continuing to struggle through these issues in isolation and alone. So sexgodchaos.com or benderrick.com, either one of those are going to lead to a lot of the same places.
Yep.
And we can get you the help that you probably have been looking for a very long time.
Absolutely.
To learn more about what you've heard today and to engage with the Sex, God, and Chaos team, visit sexgodchaos.com.